to the entertainment Talking Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to dive into some of the quotes that came out of the mouth of Patrick Graham that I think should excite a lot of New York Giants fans. I talked about it today on Twitter, and I kind of just wanted to drive home how good of a job Patrick Graham did this year in comparison to what James Bettcher did his 2 years here with the New York Giants. And yes, some people could definitely argue that, well, the New York Giants had more talent on this year's defense, but I could also argue that the New York Giants were starting a lot of rookies, and they had a lot of injuries to this defense. Of course, going into the year, Lorenzo Carter and O'Shane Ximines were guys that we were depending on to have expanded roles with this defense this year and have breakout seasons, neither of which came to fruition due to injuries. And of course, Marcus Golden played much better the year before, had a limited role here because we didn't feel he fit the scheme. You had guys like Nico Lalos, Carter Coughlin, and Cam Brown having expanded roles as this season wore along, and of course Darnay Holmes in the slot. So the New York Giants were relying on a lot of new pieces on this defense, inexperienced rookies. Of course, we added Logan Ryan on a cost-effective deal before the year started. He played great for us, and James Bradbury and Martinez, two of the higher-profile free agency signings, and we saw guys like Janoris Jenkins and Alec Ogletree, leave. And sure, if they were in with last year's defense with Bettcher, would they have made somewhat of a difference? Yeah. Do I think it would have been that dramatic? Absolutely not. You see a guy like Leonard Williams, you saw the improvement he had with this defense last year in comparison to the year before, and several players on this roster, including Jabril Peppers, looked better under what Patrick Graham brought to the table. And I am a firm believer, if Patrick Graham sticks around like it sounds like he wants to, and we'll have to wait and see in the future, long-term, if he's going to stay here as the defensive coordinator. He did call us his dream job. I do think the New York Giants are going to have one of the best defenses in the NFL for quite some time. It's just a matter of keeping these parts together and continuing to bring in talent via the draft. Yes, I think we're missing a piece or two. We could definitely use more talent off the edge. We could definitely use a stronger second corner. But Graham is certainly a guy that gets the most out of the talent provided to him, and that is what great coaches do. And it's why I was so excited why he stayed on as the New York Giants defensive coordinator going into next year. Now, before I dive into some of the numbers and really talk about some of the huge improvements that Patrick Graham had with this defense in comparison to Bettcher, let's jump into some of the quotes of what he had to say and what some of the players had to say about Patrick Graham and playing for him. This is what Graham had to say when he talked to NJ Advanced Media. "This is my dream job, being the defensive coordinator of the New York Giants," Graham told NJ Advanced Media. "It's a great opportunity to be able to stay here and the commitment they're showing me. But the fact it's in the NFL, the fact is it's the NFL. I still got a ways to go. We've got to perform better than this past year. That's my goal, but I love being here." And I agree. We got to perform better. We got to get even better on that side of the ball. Obviously, the offense needs even bigger improvements. But if they improve over last year, well, now you're talking about potentially a top 5 defense in the NFL. Next up, I wanted to pull up this quote as well, both off of GiantsWire.com. This talking about Patrick Graham, this coming from Sean Spencer, of course, Coach Chaos, who is a member of the coaching staff on the defensive side of the football. "His brain works like no one else's brain," said Giants defensive line coach Sean Spencer. "He'll remember a play like New England play 35, right? Hash, second quarter. Tennessee was driving the ball. It was play action pass. I think they threw it to such and such. Lo and behold, you move to the computer, and it's exactly the way he diagnosed it." He went to a prestigious school, and sometimes when I hear him talk, I think, yeah, he sees things in a different way. He's really smart, defensive lineman Leonard Williams added. And that just goes to show you that Leonard Williams, I think, if the price is right, is going to want to stay with the New York Giants. You've also heard guys like Julian Love come out and say he is so excited to see how this defense could build off of last year. There was also a stat that came out from PFF that Darnay Holmes had the most amount of targets by any rookie not to surrender a touchdown, and he talked about how excited he was to be with Graham as well. And I think this defense, second year in the scheme, is only going to improve. But when you look at the job that he did in comparison to the previous years with James Bettcher and how big of a jump he had with a couple of extra pieces, but what he got out of some of the players that were in both schemes, the dramatic improvement, it is eye-opening how good of a defense the Giants had last year. As a matter of fact, it's almost comparable to the defense we had in 2016 with far more established talent. Right, you were talking about bringing in Janoris Jenkins, who at the time was a top 5 corner in the league. Olivier Vernon, who was the best edge rusher in football in free agency that year. Snacks Harrison, possibly the best nose tackle in football when we brought him in. You take a look at the job he did, it was pretty comparable to that of the 2016 squad. But when you compare it year by year, we'll start with the obvious stats: points against, yards against. In 2019, the New York Giants ranked 30th in points against, 25th in yards against. This past year, against a more challenging schedule, which I'm going to dive further into, the Giants surrendered the 9th most points in football and the 12th in yards against, and that was with a weaker offense supporting them, right? This past year, I don't think anybody would argue the New York Giants offense was worse than the prior year. Generally, when you have a better offense, that should assist the defense. There was a dramatic improvement there. When you compare the schedules, 2019 to 2020, 2019, outside of the division, you play 10 games. Of course, you play 6 games in the division. Of those 10 games, in 2019, the New York Giants only played 4 playoff teams in those 10 games. Outside of that, the 6 teams they played the Detroit Lions, who picked 3rd overall in the draft. They picked the Jets, who we all know weren't that good of a team. The Cardinals, who were picking in the top 10. The Chicago Bears, who had a bad year. I don't think they had a first-round pick. The Miami Dolphins, who were tanking for Tua. They ended up getting him, I think, at 5th overall. And the Tampa Bay Bucks, who ended up going 7-9. Then they got Tom Brady. They went to the Super Bowl. So they did not play the strongest of schedules. This past year, out of their 10 non-divisional games, the New York Giants played 7 playoff teams. Of those playoff teams, some very good offenses. They played the Ravens, the Steelers, the Browns, the Bears, the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Bucks. All 7 of those teams made the playoffs, and they also played the Cardinals, who narrowly missed the playoffs. In terms of offenses they went up against, the Bucks ranked 3rd in points, the Ravens ranked 7th in points, the Seahawks ranked 8th in points, the Steelers ranked 12th, the Cardinals 13th, the Browns 14th, and they played the Cowboys twice, who were middle of the pack at 17th overall. So they definitely didn't play what I would call a soft schedule. Let's at least put it that way. And yet, they were still able to have a top 10 defense in the NFL in comparison to arguably one of the worst defenses in the entire sport the previous year. And then when you dive into some of the other numbers, the blitz percentage was down. The previous year, we blitzed nearly 30% of the time. This past year, we blitzed 25.5% of the time, which ranked 20th in the league. Yet, only blitzing the 20th most times in the league, we were 10th in pressure rate at 25.5%. We were 14th in hurry percentage at 9.4%. We were 12th in sacks with 40, of which Leonard Williams had a lot to do with his 11.5. 6th in knockdown percentage at 11.1%. We had the 10th fewest missed tackles in football, which shows discipline, with only 97. We had the 6th fewest penalty yards against as a team, and 9 times this past year under Patrick Graham and this New York and Joe Judge, we surrendered 20 points or less 9 times. To put that in perspective, under James Betcher in 2019, we surrendered 20 points or less only 3 times, and 5 times the year before. So if you combine the previous 2 years, 32 games under Betcher, we surrendered 20 points or less 8 times, in comparison to this year, in which we did it 9 times. The last time we had 9 times of 20 points or less, 2016, when we did it 9 times. This defense was significantly improved. And the thing that is really encouraging about Patrick Graham, if this is indeed his dream job and he's going to stay here, this defense should only get better, especially if you keep these guys on board like Leonard Williams, Dalvin Tomlinson. Hopefully he could stay as well. But you have young players that are only going to get better. Guys like Darnay Holmes. Bradbury's still relatively young. You bring in another corner. Maybe you draft an edge rusher. You get guys like Lorenzo Carter back. These younger players that perform pretty well off the edge improve. You know, there is so much optimism for this team going forward. The fact that they're going to learn the scheme, the fact that they're going to be more acclimated to it. You know, even guys like Julian Love, Jabril Peppers, Xavier McKinney barely played for the New York Giants last year. The second round pick for this team that we all had very high aspirations for. So I think with Graham on board, we're going to be getting back to New York Giants football, and that is a team that is defense first. That is a team that wins games in the trenches. And with this team improving and getting better, I think you'll see a more aggressive defense next year. And I only hope and pray if this defense improves off of last year's results, it is indeed Patrick Graham's dream job, and he wants to stay here. Because I'm going to tell you what, like I said on Twitter, it's New York Giants fans' dreams that he wants to stay on board, because he did a terrific job for the Giants last year. And I am so happy that he's going to be here for the foreseeable future. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.